I want to say a very big welcome to all our viewers joining us from all around the world. My guests today are joining me from different parts of the world, including Zimbabwe, the US, and of course, Norway, but also not forgetting Pretoria. Ladies and gentlemen, our viewers, the topic under discussion today is the means to Zimbabwe's political and social economic emancipation. Before we begin our conversation today, let me give our highly esteemed guests an opportunity to give us their opening remarks. They might as well introduce themselves to us. Um, I'm going to start with Dr. Dylan. Dr. Dylan, welcome to Africa in Perspective Online Conversations. You may introduce yourself and, of course, submit your opening remarks. Dr. Dylan, over to you.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate this platform in the interest of the community of practice, where we share ideas with regards to what is happening in our country. I believe that the Zimbabwean case has become so pertinent at regional and international level, and it is only natural for any interested Zimbabwean to be engaging in these issues, because a crisis that has been going on for 2 decades deserves a substantive analysis in terms of finding ways that are best to address the situation. I'm Dylan. I'm currently involved with the New Nation movements that is based here in Pretoria, South Africa. We are currently involved in trying to come up with a new electoral model that is conducive and all-inclusive even to independent candidates. I'm also a resident researcher at the Electoral Consulting Agency of Africa. We are currently also involved in electoral reforms. I'm a student of politics. I'm a scholar of Zinashe Machengura. I'm also interested in prefigurative social movements, and thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Welcome, Doc. It's an honor to have you. I'll move on, of course, to Mr. Dombo. Mr. Dombo, could you kindly introduce yourself and, of course, also submit your opening remarks?
Thank you. My name is Tonderai Dombo, born and grew up in Maputo, Zimbabwe. I am a scholar. I'm studying peace and conflict transformation as well, and I am a historian as well. I also founded the organization called Youth in Peace Building Initiative Trust that is currently operating in Zimbabwe. And I would just say that for what we have gone through as Zimbabwe over the past 20 decades, if not since our independence, it is important that Zimbabweans, young Zimbabweans, own the narrative, and also to situate our crisis, or in quotes, within the broader context of things within Africa, so that we can understand also the historical perspective of where we are coming from, where we ought to be going. So I believe that in whatever submissions I will make, actually, it will be based on our history and the context in which Africa finds itself, which also informs what happens within Zimbabwe. So I believe that that's where I will base my arguments and move from there on how we can move forward with Zimbabwe. And yeah, thank you.
Excellent, Mr. Dombo. Thank you so much for that. I will move on to give the opportunity to Comrade Basopo to also do likewise. Comrade Basopo, kindly introduce yourself and, of course, also submit your opening remarks. Over to you, Comrade Basopo. Comrade Basopo, he is on mute. Is he away?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Revolutionary greetings to you, my brother, in the panel once again. As a favored and flavored African and proud Zimbabwean, I'm surely excited to have this historic opportunity to share my thoughts and cross-pollinate ideas on this very important platform which has been provided for by the young people. And I feel very important, but at the same time, I also want to think it's a very noble and critical platform for young people to continue speaking and airing their views with regards to the matters in the motherland. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Comrade Bastopo. Well, without further ado, I will move on to Anochidachi Kumbu, who's joining us all the way from the United States of America, Massachusetts. Anochidachi Kumbu, kindly introduce yourself to our viewers as well as submit your opening remarks. Over to you, Anochida.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, my brother. Revolutionary greetings to all the viewers of this show, and revolutionary greetings to the participants joining me for this discussion. I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion. Like the chairperson said, my name is Anotida Chukumbu, and I am a doctoral scholar here in the United States at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And I can say my broader research focus is on Southern Africa and on Zimbabwe in particular. So this is an interesting discussion that actually fits into my broader research focus, and I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion.
Excellent. Excellent. You're very much welcome. We are, of course, expecting another member of the panel. Her name is Tabiso Jamila, but, well, she's a bit running late, but she'll be joining us. Once she joins us, we'll also give her the opportunity at least to introduce herself. But without wasting time, let us get into the issue at hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I will remind you that the topic under discussion today is the means to Zimbabwe's political and socio-economic emancipation. Gentlemen, I have a couple of questions for you. And the first question that I would like to submit to you, of course, we will start with Dr. Dylan Mangani, is some would like to argue that even though Zimbabwe attained its independence in 1980, Zimbabweans are still under repression and oppression. Doc, do you share the same view? Is Zimbabwe still under oppression and repression despite the independence that we got in 1980? Coincidentally, what is interesting is we are supposed to be celebrating Independence Day tomorrow. So I think this discussion, this discourse has come at the right time. So, Doc, do you share the same view with these people that think that despite the independence, Zimbabweans are not free?
Well, it depends on where one is standing. And I say this on the basis that if I'm to put on my political science jacket, one would invoke the reason of the state, one would invoke situational ethics, one would invoke a lot of theories that can be able to explain what is happening in Zimbabwe. But if I'm to look at it from a Marxist point of view, it is instructive in terms of analyzing a revolutionary movement that is in power in the form of ZANU-PF. And as you would understand, that the Marxist template is very instructive in terms of assessing where we have come and where we are. However, I think Zimbabwe is characterized by a number of factors that should never be treated in isolation. What we have is a liberation movement that is at the crossroads in terms of continuity and change. There are, I think, demographic politics, generational politics that are involved, exhausted nationalism that is in question, another liberal discourse, particularly in the post-Cold War setup where we find missed opportunities. So it is very difficult to come up with a precise answer to what is currently happening in Zimbabwe, because one would have to look at what is independence in an African context and what is oppression in the experience that we currently face in the Zimbabwean discourse. And as a result, for now, I would submit to say that it depends on which angle one is looking at it.
Excellent. It depends with which angle one is looking at. Thank you so much, Doc. We'll move on, of course, to Vadombo. How would you like to respond to this question? Do you think that Zimbabwe is still under repression and oppression?
Well, to just provide maybe one of the perspectives which I feel will be more, in my own judgment, accurate, I would say, like what Dr. Dylan says, it depends on where one is coming from, because I would take, as a historian, if we look at how the Smith-Rand government, or the colonial government in its totality before even Smith, it was one that was definitely discriminatory, one that favored the minority against the majority, and one that was totally oppressive and suppressive to the people of Zimbabwe, the majority of Zimbabweans. So to equate the current regime in Zimbabwe with the Smith regime, it may serve certain purposes when it comes to rhetoric and political grandstanding, but I would say that it will be doing unjust those who perished in process of trying to liberate ourselves. And also now, what we do not have is a defined enemy who we can point to say we have to eliminate this form of governance, because it's now our fellow black comrades that are now presiding over a system that tends to be repressive and oppressive in some pockets. So in my view, I would say that we have moved from where we were, where the system was totally and openly discriminatory, segregatory. So to say we haven't moved, it will be historically untrue in that regard.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vadombo. You share maybe the same view with Dr. Dylan Mangani, to say it depends with where you are coming from. If you look at it maybe within the historical context, then maybe it would be unjust to submit that Zimbabwe is still under repression and oppression. Well, I would like to move on, of course, to give Comrade Basopo the same opportunity to respond to this question. Basopo, Comrade Basopo, what do you
Yes.
think? What do you think regarding this? Is Zimbabwe or Zimbabweans still
Yeah.
under repression and oppression?
Zimbabwe is not only under repression and suppression, but is between the jaws of a serious, a hungry, a crocodile which is thirsty and baying for blood and to silence the people or the innocent citizens that they are supposed to be leading. Zimbabwe, in my own view, of course, I was not existing in 1980, but I would like to submit that I think Zimbabweans, they are now under more suppressive conditions than they were in 1980, looking at various and very different measures or things that we can use, including ownership of the means of production, including including so many rights that they're supposed to be having, including political freedom, including education, including all the access things that they are supposed to be accessing, including health. I think by 1980, by the standards of 1980 and up to now, we can see that the Zimbabweans are now under more precarious conditions as they were. So it is regrettable that we can talk of independence 41 years after what they called an Independence Day on Friday, 18 April 1980. I think it's regrettable, especially under these current conditions and circumstances in the country.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Comrade Basopo. Rather a different view and response to the question. Thank you for offering that differing or divergent view and response to the question. Of course, let's move on to Dr. Anochida Chikumbu. Dr. Anochida Chikumbu, do you share the same view with those who would like to argue that despite what took place in 1980, when you look at Zimbabwe, there is no difference between what is happening in Zimbabwe to maybe what took place in the Smith regime, or maybe what took place even under Hitler or Mussolini in their time. Do you share the same view? Is Zimbabwe still under repression and oppression?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. David. What an interesting question that you have brought up, for discussion today. So fundamentally, I think that those people that believe so, that Zimbabwe is not independent, have every reason to believe so. And I do also believe that the people on the other side of the argument that believe Zimbabwe is independent have every reason to believe so, depending on what Dr. Dylan has said, that how do we define independence and where do you stand? But now I just want to make an analysis here that can make the job easier for us to understand. From the very onset, we should ask ourselves, what was the reason why the liberation movements in Zimbabwe back in the 60s resorted to militant and revolutionary action to challenge the white minority government? What were the major reasons or the rallying points for the liberation of Zimbabwe? So if we are able to identify these issues and then say, now after 41 years, have we attained the rallying points or the reasons why we had to fight for independence in the very first place? You will understand that when ZANU was formed, when ZAPU was formed, when ZIPRA, when ZANLA was formed in the 60s to fight against the Ian Smith government, their rallying points were democracy. Their rallying points were one man, one vote. Their rallying points were educational opportunities for Africans. Their rallying points were jobs, economic growth, and a growth with equity, a growth that would not only be concentrated to the white minority population, but that would be all encompassing, that would be inclusive and would be enjoyable by all the Africans. But now when we look at the situation that we have in Zimbabwe, we have had a perennial crisis, if I can say. It has been crisis after crisis. From the crisis during Smith's time, the crisis after independence, the Gukurahundi crisis, the crisis in the 90s, the crisis after land reform, the crisis following the coup, and the crisis following the COVID-19 pandemic. Zimbabweans have been in crisis after crisis. When they wake up in the morning, they do not have water, they do not have jobs, they do not have the basics, they do not have electricity. So for them to be able to say, we are enjoying the fruits of independence, we are enjoying the rallying points to which our comrades had to fight for, to remove a government of white minority, the government of Ian Smith, would be very, very difficult for them to understand. If we are to look at democracy, at politics, we always have issues with our politics. We always have issues with with having free and fair elections. We always have issues with promoting free speech. Journalists are arrested on a daily basis. Politicians are arrested on a daily basis. And these issues are reminiscent of what happened during the Smith's time. So these people have every reason to believe so. And I believe that it's questionable today to for any youth or any person to be able to freely say and fundamentally accept that Zimbabwe is independent. So I think that we have a huge task to do and a huge role to play so that we can be able to ensure that people understand and enjoy the fruits of independence.
Interesting. Interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Anochida Chukumbu. So this is interesting. Now I'm really curious to hear what Chabiso has to say. Of course, I think she's still trying to connect. well, we are looking forward to have her here. But I would really want to say this. There is someone called Vongai Z. She has commented in the comment section something that I think is very important for you, our panelists. She says, why are people speaking of perspectives? For example, why are people talking about the Marxist perspective, historical perspectives? How do they feel as unfolding? What is their interpretation as to what is happening in Zimbabwe? So she would rather have you, instead of focusing on historical perspectives, of which, yes, I do understand perspectives are very important, and we would like to hear that because they guide how we look at things and how we interpret things. But she's saying that, how do you feel, you as people? Do you feel that Zimbabwe is independent? Do you feel that people are really enjoying the freedoms that they went to war to fight for? Because remember, like what Dr. Anotida Chikumbu rightly said, when the sons and daughters of Zimbabwe decided to go to war and fight the Smith regime, they had reasons, they had causes. And the hope was that after independence, they were going to enjoy certain freedoms. They were going to enjoy certain things, certain benefits that they could not enjoy before independence. So, according to Wongai, she's saying that, you guys, I know it's important to speak from various perspectives, but how do you feel as individuals? I just thought that is very important, maybe to share with you, our panelists. So, well, let's move on. I would like to move on to the second question for you, our panelists. Of course, I'm still hoping that Tabiso can join us. I hope she'll be with us very soon. Anyway, I will move on to the second question. There have been several attempts by various entities such as the opposition, activists, civil society organizations, and remarkable individuals, activists such as Ivan Mawarire, to liberate Zimbabwe through pacific means, such as elections, which we know have been rigged. You know, the rigging of elections is a common phenomenon in Africa. But in Zim, I think we have witnessed it, I think, more times than even other countries. There is substantial evidence that in Zimbabwe elections are rigged. And then exercising the right to demonstrate, which is in section 50, is it 59 or 51? I think it's 59. Comrade Basopo will obviously clarify that, the right to demonstrate. So, and of course, these demonstrations have been thwarted by the securocrats. And then we talk about legal means, which have been rendered futile because it is not an area of contestation that in Zimbabwe there is no rule of law. So my question to you, Dr. Dylan Mangani, is what do you think should be the means to Zimbabwe's political and socio-economic emancipation?
Firstly, let me respond to the question that was raised by, I think, in the audience, that why do we focus more on theory without perhaps maybe practice, if maybe that is what the question was trying to insinuate. But one of the challenges that we have in Zimbabwe is poverty in the public discourse that manifests sometimes in emotionalism, where people do not respect the value of research and academia, because it is only through theory that can be able to inform practice. And in my first and initial submissions, I said it depends on where one looks at it, in the sense that if you want to evaluate the Zimbabwean crisis from a Marxist template, you will find ZANU-PF wanting. ZANU-PF is a Marxist come socialist state that subscribe to the view that imperialism is wrong, that subscribe to economic nationalism, that subscribe to Pan-Africanism, if you look at the documents that have policy documents that were directing ZANU-PF Code of Conduct, Mwenje 2, the Chimbarenga Protocol, Sikombela declarations during the liberation struggle, here was a party that was espoused through some of these principles that have been raised by the panel to fight for a just and independent Zimbabwe. But when one closely analyzes scholars such as Zinashe Machingura, Wilfred Manda, and all these other revisionist scholars, you would realize that when it comes to the National Democratic Revolution, the party was found wanting. But we can only assess the activities of ZANU-PF, its political ideology, modus operandi, through theories. So I was just trying to remind each other that it is only through sometimes academia and research that we can be able to understand what is going on. And one of the challenges that we have in Zimbabwe is the challenge of the statist myth of socialism, whereby we have a liberation movement that believes in the assumption that it is the alpha and omega of our nationalist discourse. It believes that it has a generational mandate to represent the nation. But in Zimbabwe, 41 years into independence, we also have a post-liberation movement in the form of the MDC that is contesting the right to represent the nation. And as a result of this contentious political climate and what Stuart Hall would regard as identities being in a constant state of mobility, what we regarded in 1980 as the national question is now different 41 years into independence. However, the second question that you had asked me is what I think perhaps could be the political and socio-economic solutions to the Zimbabwean crisis, if maybe that is the right question, if I got it correctly.
Yes, I think more or less it is. Of course,
Yes.
focus, yes, on the methodology, on the means.
You see, the challenge that we have in Zimbabwe is that it is not only a domestic issue. It has become regional and international in orientation. One of the things that we should identify is that there's been now what we call political and vote apathy in Zimbabwe because of dominant party politics, where the system that operates in Zimbabwe is almost ZANU-PF into orientation. And over the course of the years, 21 years down the line, I think ZANU-PF has been able to monopolize the political and socio-economic ecosystems in Zimbabwe in such a way that the current president would, his mantra is that ukaona upenyu hwako wabva muZANU-PF. It is instructive to tell you the hegemonic type of politics that we are dealing with. But also in terms of the region has also developed political fatigue. And apparently it would seem as if the region is not in a hurry to resolve the Zimbabwean crisis. And also at international level, ZANU-PF's politics has been able to amplify the importance of Zimbabwe in the international system to a point where the picture that we have is that Zimbabwe is of strategic importance. But the reality of the matter is that Zimbabwe, because of the crisis that we have had in the past 2 decades, does not have much to offer in terms of enforcing or forcing the international community to be in a hurry to solve the Zimbabwean crisis. So we are now at a stage where, if to students of history, I think Vadombo would recall Italia Fara da Si, where would say Zimbabwe Fara da Si, Zimbabwe should go it alone. And I don't foresee the Zimbabwean crisis being attended to anytime soon, unless and until we address the ideological crisis, which I believe is at the root cause of the problem, where we find a post-liberation movement in the form of the MDC having its own ideological orientation and a liberation movement in the form of ZANU-PF. And as long as I think we have diverging views, it is almost impossible to imagine how and when maybe we can be able to solve the crisis, because at regional level, the SADC is not in a position to offer any solution beyond solidarity messages. Equally, the African Union and the international community. So I think at the end of the day, what remains as the most immediate or viable solution would be to have a convergence of a national dialogue on mapping the way forward.
A national dialogue. The Dr. Dylan Mangani says what we need is a national dialogue, and he doesn't foresee maybe trying to bring Zimbabwe to maybe, or hoping SADC to solve our issues, or even the African Union. He doesn't think that that will bear any fruits, but rather the solution for him, the means for him, should be dialogue. I will move on to Vadombo. Vadombo, you have heard what the doc has submitted, but what, in your view, do you think is the means to Zimbabwe's political and socio-economic emancipation?
Yeah, thank you, host. I like how the discussion is developing. Allow me to get a synopsis of history, responding to other submissions by the panelists, what Ongai said, and then answering the question that you've posed, because I believe there is a connection between what our understandings are and what we can do.
Exactly.
Because what we understand, what we know, forms what we are able to do. So in the case of Zimbabwe, I would first say what I feel doesn't really matter, because this is not a matter of feelings. Like what Dr. Dylan is saying, we have to also use our heads. And that, to me, is a fundamental difference in terms of what the youth in the 1960s were able to do and what the youth are failing to do now. Because the youth in the 1960s left their feelings and used their head as to what was the best way of confronting colonialism. And they executed that because they had an understanding of the situation. You would hear of pungwes that were meant to inform the general public of their role within the liberation struggle. So even if my grandmother didn't hold the gun, she was able to contribute to that liberation movement by feeding the guerrillas and not selling out the position of the guerrillas to the Zimbabweans at that time. So now we have to understand one thing which I feel should be our starting point is to understand where we are coming from, what we want to do, where we want to go, and how we will go there. So in the case of Zimbabwe, we have to understand where we have come from, because that is important. We have come from a place where the majority of people within rural areas up until around close to 2000 felt oppression and repression from colonial settlers, because it's amiss to think that in 1980 repression from the settlers ended, whereas they continued to own the means of production up until around 2000 before the land reform. So we have to understand that there are still people who are alive right now in the rural Zimbabwe, of which 75% of Zimbabweans stay in rural areas, who have a hatred of whatever colonialism stands for. And this has given credence to ZANU-PF's international rhetoric, where ZANU-PF speaks against imperialism, challenges neo-imperialism, to a point that SADC and AU in general now sees Zimbabwe as a victim for its fight against imperialism. Hence, the limited chances that we will get any regional or African Union support against ZANU-PF because of that stance against neo-imperialism. And we have to understand that most African countries are still battling with neo-imperialism in that most of their people do not own the means of production. So when we understand how the ZANU-PF ideology has continued in a way to protect it from any international interference or regional pressures that may come, to ensure that it has a leeway to do whatever it feels like it can do. And whereas we have an opposition that has come also within Zimbabwe to challenge this status quo, but you have to challenge it not only at a local level, but how are you challenging this rhetoric of ZANU-PF also at an international level to form synergies and cooperations. So if we then move, we have to understand that Africa in general, if we are being honest, there is no African country where you can say all is well in terms of the majority of people. People are complaining for one thing over the other. We have SARS recently in Nigeria. We have corruption, the oil money being looted. We have in Angola the crisis that is going on. We have in Mozambique what is going on, violence actually, Central African Republic, Benin. Name all the African countries you want, Uganda recently, where there are contestations amongst the African people and they're battling to solve their national questions. And this has to do with how colonialism functioned. Colonialism was not a function merely of force, though it was initiated through force and the use of the Maxim gun. Colonialism was perpetuated through the control of the African mind. That's why you see in Zimbabwe, you had less than, upon independence, around 400,000 white settlers and around 8 million African Zimbabweans. But still, you found the 400,000 oppressing the 8 million people. Something that can only add up if you think, if we see that it was the mindset of these 8 million people that led them to accept colonialism and to live under this colonialism. And if you look at Smith's army, it was composed of, for every 7 blacks, there was 1 white settler. So it was predominantly a black army that was led by white settlers. So what is it that our mindset has to do with the situation or predicament we find ourselves in? I think as young people, we have to sober up and understand that the global dynamics influence local dynamics, but also how then can we ensure that our dynamics here, we are not just focusing on a local dynamic, whereas the problem emanates maybe at a global level of what's the position of Africa. Has it moved from a periphery to evenly compete with the metropole? So when we look at what's happening in Zimbabwe now, it's like a global war happening at a local level. So how do we move as young people in Zimbabwe? I think the first step is to sober up and be rational in our judgments and appreciate the gravity of the situation we are facing, so we can be able to effectively confront it. So I would say what is needed is to sober up, appreciate the context, appreciate the gravity of the situation, how there is an interplay between regional bodies, global perspectives, and how then we can unite our efforts, just as the youth before us united their efforts to uproot colonialism and whatever it stood for back then. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Radombo. Tabiso. Tabiso, welcome to Africa in Perspective. Do you mind just
Hi.
lowering? I'm very much well. I don't know what's happening here. There, we are hearing a lot of feedback. Yes, maybe you might want to, maybe if there's a device that maybe you are also watching the program from, you might want to maybe lower the volume. Can you hear me very well?
I can hear you. I just wanted to find out which device would work better for me between my mobile and my laptop. I'm just hoping you can hear me so that I can continue with the laptop.
Yeah, please continue with the laptop.
Can you? Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Okay, Tabiso. Well, we had moved a bit, but I'm hoping that you could try and catch up. Maybe before we proceed, the first question that I would like to ask you, or the first question that maybe our viewers would like to hear you respond to, is, of course, the issue of repression and oppression. Do you share the view that Zimbabwe, despite having attained independence in 1980, Zimbabwe is still under repression? Zimbabwe is still under oppression. Do you share the same view?
Yes, I absolutely share the same view. I hope you can hear me quite clearly. Right?
Yes,
Confirm?
definitely.
Okay.
But
I share. Yeah.
there's a lot of noise. I don't know what's happening there. Yes, we can hear you, but I think, I don't know, the place you are in, there seems to be extra activity taking place there. We can hear that.
My goodness. That's what happens when you
But
work on a weekend. Sorry.
okay,
Is it any better now?
yeah, much better. Yeah, you can go ahead and respond to the question.
Okay, so I was saying that I feel like I share that perspective that in as much as the country has attained its independence, we still have not really, people are not free, you know. Like I always love referring to the works by Dr. Joshua, the late Dr. Joshua Mkabu Gongomo. And one of the remarkable quotes that he said in his book, My Story, is, you know, the lesson of which by a country can win its independence without the people being free. So basically, what it actually is what is happening in today's, in the context of Zimbabwe today, whereby you have people who do not have, who cannot enjoy certain freedoms, like freedom of expression, freedom of speech. You know, you have a country where the CSO space, or a space for alternative opinions, being replaced. We have a situation where we have, I like to call it a very paranoid government that is quick to react to opposing opinions and alternative opinions. So that on its own is actually a sign that we have not really achieved freedom for the people. We might have achieved the independence from the colonizer, but today's colonizer is actually the government. So I actually do share that view that we are still a long way from really attaining freedom in as much as we are independent from the colonial rule. Yeah.
Thank you, Tavi. So you remind me of what a friend of mine, a brother of mine, a guest that I once hosted, he once remarked that, well, he read a book by Walter Rodley, which talks about how Europe underdeveloped Africa. But now he feels, no, if someone is to pen down a book, it should be titled How Fellow Africans Are Underdeveloping Fellow Africans. So maybe in this context, from what you are saying, if I'm getting you well, you are saying how fellow Zimbabweans are underdeveloping, how fellow Zimbabweans are oppressing and repressing fellow Zimbabweans. Well, Tabiso, I wish you could quickly catch up, but I'm just going to take it from where I had left with Radombo, who was responding to the second question of this discourse. Now, without wasting time, let me go let me move to the second person, uh, who is, of course, Basopo. Comrade Basopo, could you respond to the same question that Dombo was responding to, which is, what do you think should be the means to liberate Zimbabwe from this political and socio-economic quagmire?
Well, thank you, my brother. Thanks so much. I think just like I think what Che Guevara once said that I'm not a liberator. People liberate themselves. I think the people of Zimbabwe and the oppressed masses of the people of Africa. I think also in the view of what Dombo was saying that we must look into what is the current issue happening at the moment. And someone talked about the national question. I think the good doctor from South Africa talked about the national question. It's important for us right now to remote, to rethink, to look into what is the national question as a country. What is our current predicament and where is it coming from, and how can we be able to come up with a solution? So the people of Zimbabwe must unite, regardless of their political parties or not looking into anything else, tribe, race, color that might divide us, and see what currently is the problem and how to liberate ourselves. And should we use passive means like we're saying, I think in this topic, in the topic under discussion, or should you use every other means of confrontation? But of course, as a revolutionary, people always resort to using what I'm forgetting the comrade, but like by any means necessary or unnecessary, should we go towards liberation by the use of using the language that the colonialist, in this case, who happens to be the fellow African, understands? So I don't know. I mean, people must look into that. People must come up with a solution and ask themselves, how should we go about this? Because like you were saying, that are we free? I mean, I don't think we are free by every other indicator. I think even if you look at the distribution of land and how land is being used into the country as an instrument of patronage, as an instrument of lowering people and punishing them, I think you have so many cases with regards to the land issue. I think you have people like Dubiso Dabemba, people like Mutasa from Manicaland, people like Temba Mliswa. I mean, all of them who, when they fell off the radar of the regime, they had their land trying to be repossessed simply because they are no longer moving with the regime. Even right now, one of the burning cases and questions in Zimbabwe is the issue of the Chilonga people. I think you know that there is an ethnic minority, the people of Chilonga, whom in the I think they have 3 phases that they are planning. That is ZANU-PF. The first phase, they are planning to remove 12,500 Chilonga people and replace them by a single white farmer or a single white company, which is called Denderi, which I'm sure even much of it is owned. In fact, all of it is owned by these by some white comrades. And if you say our people went to war so that they can get liberated or can they reclaim the land, how now can we have the confidence to displace 12,500 people, and later on in the second phase up to 21,500 people, so that we can be able to get this land possessed by the people whom at some point in time we're saying they have to redistribute the land. Even if you look at the issue of social service delivery, I think everyone can testify that by 1980 almost everyone could access healthcare from the country. In fact, it was actually free at that particular moment in time, and everyone could access healthcare. Of course, I think we had problems in the rural areas, but right now, as I speak, even within the urban areas, the government is failing to do anything. People are dying. Look at the static or the indicator of human rights themselves. I mean, all of us, you know what is happening in the country. As we speak right now, with so many young people jailed by the regime in Harare. In fact, they are specifically jailed by ZANU-PF and Emerson Mnangagwa himself. Why? Because they are sending views with Makombora Rizuishe, with one of the youngest, in fact, the youngest honorable member of parliament in the country. She is in jail. She's a lady, very conscious, properly educated. Instead of her being used by the regime to harness energy and use it towards the betterment to inspire young people, she's being jailed. Cecilia Chimbi, right now as we speak, one of Job Scala's supporters was beaten and he thrown away with some acidic liquid. You can check. He testified. Sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that is the human rights situation in the country. So many people in exile. Right now, we have more than 5 million Zimbabweans outside of this. Zimbabwe is a very small country of a total population of about 13,061,239 citizens, according to 2012 statistics. But almost half of that population, in fact, let me say 40%, is outside of the country. Then we need to ask ourselves, Allah?
Continue. You can continue. You can proceed.
We need to ask ourselves, why is it that you can have an exodus of concerned and bona fide citizens moving out of the country for economic reasons? Those are very critical and fundamental questions. One of the key questions that led our people into liberation was issues surrounding tax and extractive institutions, exclusive institutions, institutions that are exclusionary, that are not inclusionary, and extracting the little that the people are getting. I think you understand that one of the key questions that the people are fighting is that where is our tax money going? And you have a neoliberal government which has actually deserted the socialist agenda or the socialist base that they use to rally support of the people towards the liberation and post the liberation. Right now, we have a confused government ideologically, and which is being spearheaded by people like Professor Mthuli Ncube and Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, who talks of Zimbabwe is open for business. The mantra, which is fundamental against the founding principles of that particular party, and which is why it made them to get into power by 1980. So I think we have a cocktail of problems, and these must be resolved by the people of Zimbabwe, in particular the young people. And why do I say the young people? Because they constitute about 69% of the entire population, and that is a very big chunk. And they must know that the future belongs to them, the current circumstance belongs to them, and this was shaped by previous generations. So this is what I think. But we need to man up, we need to rise up, and the struggle must continue.
Thank you so much, Comrade Dombo. But I feel you didn't really address the question that I want you to answer. What we are aware of the deteriorating situation in Zimbabwe. We are aware of the plight of the people in Zimbabwe. The $1 million question is, what means? What should they do? Yes, you are saying the people should come together and see what they should do. But what I want to hear from you is, what do you say they should do? What should they do?
My brother, Frantz Fanon once said, I think this is a very popular quote, that each and every generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. It is not up to me as an individual to prescribe a solution to the country when 69% of the people or in a population, they are affected by the same predicament. Why do I say that we need, or the people must come up together and think? It's because we need to craft a solution. We need to identify our problem, fight towards it. Yes, here I can prescribe that let us go and remove Emerson Mnangagwa by force, or let us use guns, or let us connive with the military and have a coup, or let us go to the elections. But this must not be within an individual to prescribe a solution for the country, which is why we are here. Why Zimbabwe is failing is traced back to what they call Mugabeism. Why? Because the national solution or the national ideology was predicated upon Robert Mugabe's mentality and thoughts as an individual. I hope you're getting what I'm saying.
Thank you, Comrade Basofo. Let me, of course, bring in Dr. Anochida Chukumbu. Dr. Anochida Chukumbu, same question, my brother. What should be done? What means should be employed, of course, to liberate, to emancipate Zimbabwe or Zimbabweans as a people? What do you say?
Well, so I understand the two extremes of the answer that I might possibly give, that might require me to either say that we should resort to militant and revolutionary nationalism so as to address our plights and to be able to dismantle a regime that we believe is oppressing us. And on the other side of the argument is the view that we have to always embrace peaceful means to fighting for change. Peaceful means that include dialogue, that include elections, to be able to address our plight. But from my understanding, from the history of the country, from my understanding of the history of the country, is that we need to be able to ask ourselves that the current government that we have, how did it attain power? How did it get there? And we also need to understand the mentality of the people that are up there in government, and to be able to know what they think, how they think, and how they respond to issues, to the plight of the people. And you will understand that we are facing a government that attained power through the gun, that attained power through the liberation movement that we popularly refer to as the second Chimrenga, that was then followed by elections. So we still have those very same people that believe in the military, that believe in military action so much, so that they are now even repressing palpable potential opposition by military means. I wouldn't want to say I'm an advocate of militant and revolutionary mass nationalism, but I would rather say it's an idea that we are going to have to resort to as a last resort, given that dialogue has failed, given that elections have failed, given that mass action or protest movements have failed. But now the point is that we just need to have a unity of purpose and understand what we are fighting for and how we need to fight the fight that we are engaged in, for the fight for democratization, the fight for a growth with equity, for economic growth, and so forth. So this is what I fundamentally believe, and I also believe that the youth are at the center of this, of having to decide whether we need to resort to revolutionary and military action to address our plight, or we still have to continue with mass protests, with demonstrations, with believing in elections and democracy that is going to eventually address our issues. But from my understanding of the history of the country, when everything has failed, people will resort to revolutionary and military action to address their plights.
Revolutionary, militant ways and means, you say. Thank you so much, Anochida Chikumbu. But maybe before I move on to Jamela Tabiso, I would like to ask you a follow-up question. Well, we talk about fighting or resorting to militant action. My question is, of course, I'm also quite aware of what Frantz Fanon argues. Frantz Fanon, I think he would, if he was here today, he would 100% agree with you, my brother, to say that the extreme means that can be taken is that of militant actions, since the pacific means have already proved futile. But now the question is, once you go some would like to argue, for example, if you look at Martin Luther King, if you pursue the militant action, what kind of a government are we going to produce out of that militant action? Because some would like to argue, for example, the reason why we have oppression today, the reason why we have ZANU-PF oppressing and repressing the people of Zimbabwe, it is because of the root of violence that it used to attain independence for Zimbabwe. Hence, they feel that they own the people of Zimbabwe. Hence, they feel the people of Zimbabwe owe them because they took the bold militant action to liberate Zimbabwe. So to some extent, one would like to argue that the reason why we have this oppression, or we have this kind of regime that is there in Zimbabwe, it is because of the means that was used by the middle class then in the 1960s going onwards to liberate Zimbabwe. So I don't know, how would you like to respond to that view?
Well, it all goes back to the fact that did the liberation movements understand what it means to govern a country? They did understand that we need to liberate our country, we need to fight for the masses, but they didn't understand the majority of them didn't understand what it means to govern, what it means to govern democratically, what it means to grow an economy. Many of them didn't have that experience of knowing what to do with a country, how to run an economy and so forth. So that became a problem. Although they were able to achieve the very fundamental point of liberation, they didn't understand what was supposed to be done after liberation, which is what we need to be mindful of as we organize or as we advocate for either military action or peaceful means or dialogue or elections. We need to understand what we would want to do after we have attained the goals that we want to achieve. And the point is, if back in 1980 we had people who understand what it means to liberate and what it then means to transition to the point of governing, they would have established constitutions, they would have established institutions of government that would be impartial, they would have governed democratically, they would have embraced values of respect for human rights and the rule of law, and they would have grown the economy to such an extent that we would be a better off nation today. But those values were lost because the people did not understand what it means to transition to the point of governance, which gets to the point that if we are to resort to revolutionary and military action to fight against the current government, we do also need to understand that if we are successful in resorting to that, that is to say, if it's done, if we are successful, what do we have to do if we achieve that end? What mechanisms should we set up? What institutions should we set up? What laws should we put in place so that we are able to establish a society that will not embrace violence, that will not embrace antagonism with each other as a way of getting power or as a way of oppressing people? That itself was not done. When Zimbabwe got independence in 1980, it was like what Franz Fanon also says, that it's black skin, white mask. You know, we just became the black government or the black leaders just became the new oppressors in a different form. But that is not what we would want to happen right now. We want a different setting. We want an understanding of what we are fighting for, an understanding of how we can then transition the political economy into a democratic one, a one that would assure people a happy, a prosperous, and fulfilling life.
Thank you, Anochida Chikumbu. Well, I would like to move on to Tabiso. Tabiso, are you there? Could you confirm that you are there?
Oh, here. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Tabiso, the same question. The same question that Anochida Chikumbu was just answering to.
The question on the means, is it?
Yes, on the means. What do you think we should do? What should we do? What should be the means? The means we must adopt. What means should we adopt to liberate Zimbabwe?
My honest opinion tells me that Zimbabwe is beyond redemption. Okay. But I feel like what Anu actually articulated makes sense. I feel like, I don't know. The challenge that we have right now is, I think we are failing to define our challenge as a nation, of where I see this going beyond just political repression of opposition and alternative voices. I feel it's an attack on the young people. Remember, we're also talking about the contribution of young people. I want to be very biased to the contribution of young people when it comes to democracy and good governance in the country. And I feel like we haven't really reached a point where young people across political affiliations have actually noticed that the happenings of today, where we have young political activists being incarcerated, being arrested, the law being used as a weapon to silence the voices of young people, as an attack to young people in general. Right now, we do not really care much because probably we come from different belief systems and we come from different political affiliations. So someone might want to look at it and think, oh, it's affecting people from the MDC alliance. So really, but what we don't see is that it's an attack on the entire generation. And at the end of the day, if we really do not see that, it will be then hard for us to change the system, because this whole thing is a system, right? And it will be very hard for us to really come with a solution that is tangible, that will lead us to liberation. So I feel like we need to first, as young people, convince each other that this is about young people. Let's look at parliament. How many seats are there for young people? Let's look at the cabinet. Let's look at all the governance systems and structures and see how many young people are. You know, one thing that I've learned to understand about the ruling party is how ageistic it is, and how they find some funny strategies of silencing young people, of probably giving them something, some piece of land somewhere, so that someone at the end of the day would not be able to really point out corruption and bad governance and human rights violation, because it's about bread and butter issues. This is how they control people. It actually is working in their favor right now, the whole economic instability, because at the end of the day, someone is forced to think between doing the right thing and also pursuing self-interest, where they are given bread today, and really today the politics of today is the politics of the stomach. So I feel like as young people, we really need to get to a point where we convince each other to say, look, in as much as we belong to different ideologies in terms of politics, this is about us young people. We have set a precedence, a very wrong precedence, that politics in Zimbabwe is not a space for young people, that politics in Zimbabwe is not a space for young women, as we see what is happening to the trio that have been victims of abuse. They've been victims of unlawful and flimsy charges, really. So at the end of the day, I feel like when we get to that point where we see each other from the same lens, where we get to that point where we actually see that if we are to break the cycle, because this is a vicious cycle, right? We have people that went to war, fine. We have people that went to war and liberated this country, which was good, and we appreciate the efforts. But the same liberation struggle is now being used as a ransom, is now being used to hold us at ransom, to say that we went to war. So it basically means that we have to own this country. So young people on their own have to find means of now doing the second liberation for young people, because at the end of the day, we are going to be, going around in circles with this vicious circle, and we are not able to see that this is not just about young people in the MDC Alliance. It's not just about young people, human rights activists. It's about the young people of Zimbabwe. So when we start seeing that, then we'll be able to put together our collective energy and try to come with a way forward of saying, what is it that we have to do as young people. But I think the fact that we're still at a point where there's a lot of selective solidarity amongst us as young people, I mean, we are still going to be facing the same challenges. We're still going to be in the same place, and nothing really is going to move. So personally, I feel like we need to conscientize each other as young people first, and be able to see the situations, the crisis, the political crisis in Zimbabwe from one lens, and then we'll be able as young people, there's something about numbers, there's power in numbers, and we haven't really recognized that power as young people. But the moment we start seeing and recognizing that power, it would even be good to see young people, even from ZANU-PF itself, taking up critical position in governance, critical positions in parliament, and then it could be a start. But now we have a whole parliament, a whole government that does not understand the struggles of today's youth, because all they know and all they understand about themselves as old people. And at the end of the day, we are always going to be going around in circles, and we are the ones who are really feeling the heat. So I feel like we really need to come together, put our collective energy together, and come up with solutions that we feel can actually help us going forward as young people.
Thank you, Taviso. Thank you, Taviso. It's one point that is really reverberating throughout all contributions, that there is need for young people to come together. It's interesting that I saw that the part B responses to this question was more dwelling or zeroing in on the young people. So I think we all share the same standpoint or view that the young people are critical in this whole discourse, in all these issues. So maybe talking about young people, what I want to do is I want to bring in Dr. Dr. Dylan Mangani. Doc, I understand there's a device that is on, which is giving feedback. Yeah. Okay.
Can you
So
hear me now?
now I can hear you. Doc,
Can you hear
the
me?
question, definitely, definitely. The question that I need you, Doc, to answer now is about the young people, the young people, the young people in Zimbabwe. You know, there are those who would like to castigate the young people in Zimbabwe and conclude that the young people in Zimbabwe have become docile. They think that, well, they are no longer interested in doing something about their condition, and they feel that they are not doing much. So, Doc, the question to you is, do you share the same view? Do you think the young people right now, as we are talking, in as much as there is a political crisis, a socio-economic crisis in Zimbabwe, do you feel or do you share the view that the young people in Zimbabwe are docile?
Firstly, I think it would be a misrepresentation of facts if we were to conclude that the young people have become docile. My first submission is that the November coup in 2017 was a manifestation of the old guard's abhorrence on young people's politics. Forget the constituency of the G40 faction in ZANU-PF and dwell much on its ideological orientation. This was basically a faction that was predicated or grounded on the view that it was time that the young people take over in ZANU-PF. And unfortunately, by default or design, a number of Zimbabweans thronged into the streets of Harare in support of the view that the young people should be blocked from taking over power. There was an assumption that because there was the former First Lady, there was Professor Moyo, Kasukwere, and all these other people. Hence, that was meant to water down on the G40. But the reality of the matter is that the G40 was a group of people that had no connection to the liberation struggle whatsoever. And for some reasons, they were trying to introduce different types of politics in ZANU-PF. The entrance point of entry here is not whether G40 was correct or not, but the ideological and symbolical, instructive, and lessons that we could have and we should have learned from the G40. Secondly, I think it would be very unfair for us to say that the young people have become docile, because in my opinion, I think Advocate Nelson Chamisa represent what Max Weber would refer to the self-interpretation of society, where we are saying generation of young people that are converging, coming together and trying to define post-independent politics in a different way. But what we see in the MD guard to try and delegitimize Nelson Chamisa, to water down on his ability to lead the movement on the basis of his age. And I think at a regional and international level, there should be a concerted effort to try and understand Chamisa's agenda, to try and understand, and perhaps to a certain point, to support Chamisa back to what is currently happening in the Zimbabwean crisis and submit that unless and until we confront the elephant in the room, that is the military, unless and until we confront the elephant in the room, that is the liberation or ex-combatants, we risk going from pillar to wall in as far as we try to come up with a solution in Zimbabwe. The challenge that we have in Zimbabwe is that we are trying to approach this from a legal or litigation point of view that produces winners and losers. But yet, we need to be able to come to a position where we look at the fact that the level playing field in Zimbabwe has become so one-sided to a point where Nelson Chamisa is not able to contribute much to the crisis that in Zimbabwe. The reason why I say that I'm giving the example of Nelson Chamisa is on the basis that in the 2018 general elections, if we are to go by the results that were given by ZEC, Nelson Chamisa got probably 49% of the votes, meaning to say he almost got half of the Zimbabwean population rallying behind him. And as a result, we are saying that Zimbabwe is divided along Chamisa and Mnangagwa lines in as far as representing the nation is concerned. And for people to think that the young reality is obtaining on the ground, it is a problem. And I would want to take you from what the vice president of the MDC, Tendai Biti, had suggested, that at one point as Zimbabweans, we need to come to a point where we say, let us have a sit down with ex-combatants, with the war veterans, and with the militaries, and we find ways of trying to appease them out of power. We find ways of trying to accommodate them. Because if we go back to 1980, you would realize that these people, in as far as rehabilitation is concerned, they were not rehabilitated in such a way that this sense of entitlement continues to be dominant in our politics. And as long as we do not confront the elephant in the room, the military and the war veterans, and as long as the opposition does not come to a point of convergence with these institutions, it becomes a problem. And we also need to appreciate the role of the regional and international community in as far as coming with a solution to the Zimbabwean crisis is concerned. Because even the liberation movements, ZANU, ZAPU, and all these other ones, ANC in the region, they could not come to a resolution without the support of the regional and international community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc, for your response. Quite detailed. Quite detailed. Well, I would like to move on to Dombo. Vadombo, this is your time now. What do you think? Do you think the young people in Zimbabwe are docile?
Well, I would say people who say that usually have ulterior motives, and it usually is said by people who are frustrated that young people are not joining in their personal wars at times, or how they want young people to behave or act. But we have to understand that young people are not just a whole group. For instance, I refuse to be grouped together with as young people with those who were born maybe from 1980 to around 1990, because that group sort of benefited from whatever was left of the good within the 90s of the country. Most of them went to college through state grants. So when you branch me in those groups, you are failing to consider or to appreciate the group to which I belong, which is a group of young people who were born when Zimbabwe was actually in a serious crisis in terms of available opportunities for young people. A group that was born when there were no grants to be found at universities. So that group of young people that is taking to drugs in the ghettos there, to which I belong, cannot be branded or mixed with the group of young people who, when they left university or colleges, there was still something in terms of the economy that could sustain them, and they built careers from there. We are talking of young people like myself who have never wasted time printing CVs to move around Zimbabwe, putting those CVs to companies, because it is now not realistic that you can find a job by way of printing CVs and moving around with them. So I can speak to say that group of young people to which I belong cannot be said that it is docile, because it is a group of young people whose fight is fundamentally different from the fight that other groups can say. We are talking of a Zimbabwe where the expected age limit, life expectancy actually, is 38 years. So anyone who has passed 38 years in Zimbabwe becomes a grandfather in terms of the dynamics of young people within the country, because we have a majority of our young people below the age of 25, actually. So how then do you expect the aspirations of those who are young people close to 40, above 35 at least, to tally with the expectations of young people who know nothing but misery since the day they were born? So docile in terms of what? Because we are talking that those who have become privileged and elitist are the ones who find ways into government, are the ones who find themselves in politics or wherever they are, whereas the majority of us are excluded from the system. So how can we be docile when we are victims? So I would say young people are more of victims than anything else within Zimbabwe, victims that are excluded from any meaningful participation within the politics, except being used by or abused by these politicians who are mostly from elite families. Now going to university in Zimbabwe has become an elite thing, because it's no longer open to every talented scholar back in Zimbabwe. So we do not want to address how people find themselves there, elites leading elites and accusing the victims of not joining in their fights. So I refuse to take that docile label. I think it is just meant to make young people angry and reactionary, thinking in moments, not logically, and it's said by those who do not understand where we are at as young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dombo. Let me now bring in Comrade Basopo. Comrade Basopo, how would you respond to this view? Are we docile? Are the young people in Zimbabwe docile? Are young Zimbabweans docile in terms of emancipating themselves from this political and socio-economic crisis that Zimbabwe finds itself?
Young people are absolutely not docile in my own view. Like if you check at various incidences, young people have been very critical. I think actually one of the key things that is affecting the country is that our politics is quite toxic and very, very dangerous terrain to be meddling in. But if you check at a particular moment in time, when the politics came into being, like perceived as safe, towards within the transition from Robert Mugabe to Emerson Mnangagwa, during what we all want to refer to as a coup. Look at the participation of young people towards removing Robert Mugabe. Why were so many people so active? Why were so many people open up, showing that they are not in for Robert Mugabe? It is because it was not dangerous at that particular moment in time. Look how the various universities rose and said, Mugabe must go, including the University of Zimbabwe itself. They even went a step further by saying Nyagura Levi must go. We need a new dispensation. We need a new type of governance. And everyone has opened up. They spoke about it. It is because young people are very clear and they are very active. Look at the participation of young people alone in the past or recent plebiscite. Look at the numbers, the proportions in terms of age of the people who voted. Most of them, the young people, of course, regardless of the fact that they already constitute the greater part of the demography, but their participation was something which was phenomenal. So if right now, as we speak, most of the victims of political violence in the country, they're not the elderly generation, it's the young people. Of all the political prisoners in the country right now in Zimbabwe, all of them, the young people, the people who are victimized, the people who are being targeted, the young people. So I don't think, and by the fact that the young people are not participating, people who say so, of course, Zimbabwe has been going through a very long and torrid time of trying to fight or to extricate ourselves from ZANU-PF rule. And most people, they have become so impatient, and now the blame game is now playing. It's now taking its role. Everyone finds a scapegoat of blaming or someone to blame as to why their situation is like that. So I think at the end of the day, it's very convenient to blame young people. Like, why are we in this situation? Why are you guys not confronting like what used to happen during the days of Ian Smith and like that, without looking at the changes within the circumstances and the realities on the ground? So I want to exonerate the young people, but I also want to think that there is every room for us to be more active. But the expectations of almost everyone in terms of young people are not active is not necessarily through voting, because by the standards of voting, as a matter of fact, Advocate Nelson Chamisa won the past election, and that was through the efforts of what the people of Zimbabwe, the people in the country, refer to as generational consensus. What was the generational consensus? Or what was the consensus about? It was generational. When you say generational, we mean the young people saying, no, it's now the time for us to take over the rules. It's now the time for us to push our own. Then we found the young, swaggering, eloquent, well-educated advocate taking over the lead of the young people in the form of Nelson Wamba Chamisa. And I was very happy when the young people said so. And I think that was very important. So, we can always push. Let us continue to push the people of Zimbabwe towards the liberation of our people. It's important that, people want us to start abducting some people, people want to start doing it to go the Cabo Delgado way. But I don't think violence always begets violence. I still remember talking to the young person that I was talking about, the leader of the young people. He told me that, no, Basopo, look, violence begets violence. Yeah, violence is addictive. If you get into governance through the use of violence, we are most likely also not going to sustain that political power, because our leadership and our leadership or our tenure is most likely going to be resisted through violence. So it's always important for us to try and lure people through the necessary democratic means. So these are my submissions, Commander and brother. Young people are not docile. Let's push.
They're young people. I think it's clear. It's crystal clear.
Yes.
From the submissions that you have made, from the submissions that have been made by Dr. Dylan, and of course, Radombo, young people are not docile. They are not docile. Yes, also I like also how you brought in the point that we must understand that the dynamics have changed, the times have changed. I think Adombo also made that very clear. The times have changed. The factors surrounding young people right now are very different. So those who are saying that young people are being docile or are docile, they are not speaking correctly. Thank you so much, Thank you so much, my brother. Let me move on to Anotida Chikumpu. Anotida Chikumpu.
Yes, Mr.
Anotida
David.
Chikumpu.
Yes,
You
Mr. David.
you and I, we penned down an article about this subject matter where we were talking about young people. And I remember very clearly we stated that we do not think that young people are docile. It's only that, like what Dombo was saying, like what Basopo was saying, the circumstances have changed. There is
Mhm.
so much barriers, there's so much to overcome, so much overwhelming things to overcome for young people to effectively participate in politics without fear of being arrested, without fear of being abducted, without fear of being, of being tortured, without fear of many other things. Would write a book about the things that can happen to young people if they are to effectively take part in politics as a way of emancipating themselves from this whole mess. But of course, I would like for you to also respond to the same question for our viewers. What do you say? Are young people docile? If by any chance you think they are docile, what do you think should be done to fish them out of that docile place? Over to you.
Mhm. Well, thank you very much for that question, Mr. David. I do share these same sentiments as those of the previous speakers. I believe that the argument that young people are docile in their complicity to the deteriorating political economy of our country is an argument that breaks down when subjected to critical analysis. It's an argument that fails to take into account the heavy yoke of unemployment, of poverty, and of repression, and as well as the malevolence of the administration of President Emerson Mnangagwa. You will know that young people are not a homogeneous entity, like what has been said by Mr. Dombo, that we can't be identified homogeneously and described to be docile. That is not true. That is not a representation of the actual fact. Although we have a substantial number of people, a substantial group of youths that do not have the political will to speak up or the political will to support those who speak up or the political will to just engage generally into the issues that have to do with the plight of the people and how to address the issues that can assure us to have a better economy and a better government. We do have a substantial number of people who are like that, who can actually be quote unquote described as docile. But we need to be able to see that the struggle for democratic change needs to be shouldered on by folks of all ages. We need the youth, we need old people again. We need what Comrade Basopo is referring to as the generational consensus. We need all those people that are involved, all the stakeholders of a country, folks of all ages should be able to participate in this process of fighting for democratic change. So young people are caught in between two extremes. The extreme that when they do not speak up against the deteriorating political economy, they will be castigated as docile. And when they do speak up, they are not supported by folks of older generations. Like they are left to organize disoriented movements that will obviously become unsuccessful, and only to be told that zvepolitics zvine siyana nazvo munofamba muri vana vadiki, which creates a toxic culture of apathy, of pessimism and despondency amongst young people. So young people are more victims. They are not at all docile in their complicity. We have so many outstanding personalities, outstanding young people who are doing an outstanding and phenomenal job in as much as the fight for democratic change is concerned. We just need to soldier on. We just need to ensure that we conscientize as more youths as possible so that they develop the political will to fight for democratization. I've written a newspaper article for the newspaper that we normally contribute to together with the chairperson, and I believe more ideas can be seen on that article. It's called Fight or Surrender. The Plight of the Young, and it was published by the Daily Maverick. It appeared in the section that is called the Maverick Citizen. Thank you very much for that, Mr. David.
Very much welcome, Anotida Chikumbu, for those submissions. Tabiso, would you come in to submit your responses in regard to this question? Do you think young people are docile? Maybe if you could do it briefly, maybe in 5 minutes, so that we can move on to have the panel submit their closing remarks. I hadn't realized we are almost 2 hours, 36 minutes now. So yeah, in 5 minutes, do you think young people are docile?
Absolutely not. I don't think young people are docile. I just think we haven't really gotten to a place where we can pull together as young people. I feel like there are young people who are doing amazing work. I feel like there are young people who are trying by all means to challenge the the state of affairs in this country, really. But unfortunately, it's easy to pick out people when we are not putting in collective efforts, when people are not working in together. It's easy to really pick up. If you look at instances of people like Marco, people like Joanna and stuff, it's so easy for someone to challenge, to target them, because it's just a few people that people can actually see. But if we were to come together as a collective, trust me, the regime in Harare will not have a choice but to try and listen to what we are trying to say as young people. So I feel like young people are not really docile. There are young people that are out there that are ready to, by all means, get us to the Zimbabwe that we want as young people. But unfortunately, it's I always say that consciousness is a voluntary thing. You cannot really force someone to choose to be politically conscious, so people choose what they want to do, what is important to them. People choose what to follow, what not to follow. People choose where to put their solidarity, where not to. And you really cannot force people to see things in your own way. So, and that's the most unfortunate part, that we really haven't gotten to a place where we can start pulling together as young people, but we still have isolated groups of young people who are really doing stuff, who are really pushing for stuff. Unfortunately, that doesn't trend, because that's not what interests everyone else. So if we could all put the same collective energy, I want to believe that Zimbabwe would have never won its liberation if it wasn't for the brave young women and men who came together. So the whole idea now for us to really get to a point where we want to get to a point of a revolution is when we have the spirit of unity, and when we pull our energies together as young people. I'm sure we are going to be in a situation where we can actually try and find solutions together. Like I said before, to say that really what is happening right now in Zimbabwe is because we have young men and women back then of yesteryear who went and fought the colonizer, right? But they are the same people who are now holding us at ransom as young people, who are not giving us opportunities. So some of these things, really, it's not a predicament that we brought to ourselves as young people, but I feel like it's at some point beyond our control, but we really haven't started trying to work as a collective. We still have isolated cases. We still have people choosing what works for them. If someone thinks that getting bread today is enough for them, then it's okay. That's what they feel like. But I don't want to discredit the efforts of young people out there who are doing so much amazing work to try and get us the Zimbabwe that we want.
Thank you so much, Tabiso. Thank you so much for your submissions. Well, without further ado, we are fast running out of time. I would like to ask everyone that is on the panel to, of course, submit their closing remarks, you could do so like what I've written in the comment section by quickly, briefly summarize your submissions, your responses to the questions that were raised, and of course, possibly offer recommendations to the young people, to Zimbabweans, on what should be done, a course of action in as much as bettering the situation in Zimbabwe is concerned, because there is need really to do something about what's happening in Zimbabwe. So, of course, following our sequence, I'm going to start with Dr. Dylan. Please, Dr. Dylan, give us your closing remarks and, of course, possibly some recommendations. So, Dr. Dylan, over to you.
In my submission, I would think that the first port of call is to be able to address the socio-economic situation that we find ourselves in Zimbabwe. The reason being that it's almost easier to disempower and to co-opt alternative voices into the current system that is into the status quo that is unsustainable, as history would recall. Why am I saying this? Because over the years, ZANU-PF has been able to manipulate the political, economic, and social aspects or facets of the nation. It has become easier for the use of patronage, carrot and stick type of politics as tools to be able to sustain a liberation movement. You would recall that one of the objectives of a liberation movement is to stay in power forever. And it would use any means available at its disposal to ensure that it co-opts or disempowers the opposition in the form of the MDC alliance and co-opting other smaller parties as a veneer of legality. The second submission I would make is that we have an elephant in the room in the form of ex-combatants and the military. These are supposed to say, let's have a discussion with them. If we are to look at some of the transitional justice models that apply in conflict studies, we have restorative justice and retributive justice, of which I think people are mostly concerned about the latter, which somehow hardens the stance of the military, like what happened in 2017. I would opt for a restorative justice approach where we try to have a round table with the ZANU-PF being a very important and active player in our politics, the military, civil society, religious leaders, and the opposition. Then we develop what we call a national identity, a national agenda, and we craft the way forward. Because for some reasons, I do believe that ex-combatants need rehabilitation so that they move away from politics. And for some reasons, I also do believe that even the military needs to be democratized so that they go back to the barracks. The third submission would be that I had a conversation with one of the former ministers who was in the government up to November 2017. And one of the submissions that he made to me was that the challenge with the region is that they want to be confident with our opposition politics. And I raised this question that as long as we have a socio-economic crisis that is obtaining in Zimbabwe, a person like Chamisa, obviously, the only asset that he has are the votes, the ordinary people. Yet our current political status quo does not empower ordinary citizens. So it would be very unfortunate and unfair to expect that Chamisa can be able to coalesce, weave together all these dissenting voices, all these multiple actors that are very much involved in Zimbabwe, mapping the way forward. I think as a result, the first thing that we need to do is to come up with a solution where we address the socio-economic crisis in Zimbabwe. And in that way, we are also able to empower alternative voices, because by democracy by extension and by its nature requires that we have all these alternative voices. And fourthly, I have a bit of a challenge with the submission that the solution in Zimbabwe lies with the young people, because it also breeds a sense of entitlement. The next thing is we are going to have feminists that will say we also need voices. The next thing is also going to have old guard that says we also need voices. And I would also agree with what my learned doctor said, that the crisis to Zimbabwe solution involves everybody, the young and the old. And in conclusion, I think if we are able to look at all these factors that I've been able to raise, we can be able to come up with a way forward in terms of what is it that we need as a Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dylan Mangani. Your submissions are very much appreciated, Doc. Now let me move on to Vadombo to do likewise. Submit your closing remarks and, of course, maybe possibly give us some recommendations on what needs to be done to deal with the crisis that we find in Zimbabwe.
Well, thank you. I would start by saying that we have to fully appreciate the problems that we are facing. That's something that we have to do, and we have to have a conscious an effort to conscientize our people so they can understand what role they have to play within our body politic. If the people do not have power, they cannot give power. And I think that the opposition and whoever is vying to take over power within Zimbabwe and move us in a different direction as a nation has to understand that. So efforts to emancipate our people so they can have power and a saying within the country is important, because democracy cannot function when it is detected from these bodies, some of the groups that have been mentioned, the church, the political leaders, the warfare. If they remain with power, as is the case now, we will not see a true emancipation or a true democratic society, because the majority of the people will not have a voice. And when the majority of the people do not have a voice, there is no accountability. That's why you see we have institutionalized personalities. We will have now. We used to have Morgan Changre. Now we have Chamisa. We used to have Mugabe. Now we have Emerson Mnangagwa. So we continuously replace those who die with new people, but the system and culture remains the same. And that will continue to haunt us as a people, because the majority of our people have no voice. And democracy will only function when society has a voice and contributes to the national question by carrying out dialogues from community level going upwards. So I believe that there is need for a dialogue that is all encompassing, a round table dialogue in which there are no high tables, where everyone from the least in our society contributes to shaping the vision of the nation, because that's where we can start to build from. And as long as we remain holding on to these people and immortalizing them, even deifying individuals, we will not move forward as a nation. And history has shown us that. So we need to move away from that, emancipate our people, let our people have power, let our people contribute, let them have voices and a saying in what is going on within the body politic. I think that's my main recommendation. And I would say that as young people, we need to own our history, because ZANU-PF remains to have a monopoly over liberation history in which everyone participated in. So as young people, we should also own our history, not be ashamed of our history, own it and challenge the reasoning behind the status quo. I would say that violence in my view, will not get us anywhere, because even if we choose to fight today, if we are to get guns, who we will be shooting? We will be shooting the soldiers that are underpaid. We will be shooting the police that are underpaid and also suffering. We will be shooting our grandmothers in the villages who still find ZANU-PF appealing. Who we will be shooting? We will be shooting the elites. I don't know. So if it's killing each other, we have to also define who are we going to kill. If it's moving towards elections, we have to also identify how are we implementing those steps. I think we have to say, I would say, never claim easy victories. Let us be clear on where we want to go, how we want to go there. And that should be what young people should be doing, thinking, talking like this, and understanding where we want to go. Then the people can join in, and what role the people can also play in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Vadumpo. Solomonic voice, Solomonic contributions also. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to bring in Comrade Basopo. Comrade Basopo, your closing remarks and possibly recommendations.
Thank you. No, indeed, Solomonic voices from this decorated panel of intellectuals. You know, I feel so inferior to be the only peasant amongst a panel of doctors here present. I really appreciate. Thank you very much, guys, for giving me this opportunity. Once again, thanks very much to all the people who have been following on this particular discussion. And as we were putting our 2 cents of little contributions into the crisis in Zimbabwe. But young people, I think this has become the central or the center piece of this struggle, young people and the independence in our country. And I've noted that the whole panel of esteemed doctors has come up to a conclusion that there's no independence to be celebrating existence at the moment, because the people are not truly and totally independent in terms of what they're supposed to be having or accessing as manifestations of a total and truly independent state. But young people, let us continue to major on the major things. Let us not major the minors. Let us continue firing, and let us continue pushing that which has to be put. Just like what Samora Machel would say, that when bullets begin to shower and flower, a luta continua. That is the very same mentality we need to have as young people. Let us also continue to have solidarity upon each other. Solidarity is the centerpiece, the cornerstone of successful revolutions and successful societal transformation. In 1959, the first independent country in Africa, Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah would say that until the rest of Africa is independent, Ghana is not independent. The same applied in 1975 when Mozambique became independent under the able leadership of the late Marxist revolutionary Samora Machel. He would say that Mozambique is not independent until Zimbabwe is independent. So solidarity, oneness is key. The popular African philosophy of Ubuntu, you are because I am and I am because you are. Young people, let us not feel comfortable to be sleeping within the comfort of the two sheets, the good blankets that we have. When Joanna Mamombe, Cecilia Chimbiri, they are all incarcerated. Let us know that we need to establish countries on clear and strong institutions. The reason why people like Chipanga had to be victimized, regardless of them being young people, the reason why they had to have their properties seized, their farms taken, it is not because they are only, it is not because they are ZANU-PF or they were ZANU-PF per se, but it's because the young people are under attack. And the young people, when they are enjoying what the system is offering, they fail to advocate for strong systems. Look at my brother Senengam, who used to be ZANU-PF, and so many other young people. So let us advocate strong institutions. Let us not let us not push for politics of personality. Let us push to have countries that are competitive globally. Zimbabwe is a young country. It is promising. So many potentials that are naturally within it, including youth, young people. I'm happy to see, my brother, you are organizing very important discussions around the country. I read your submissions at Mail and Guardian, if not mistaken, in South Africa, the South African newspaper. That was a very powerful article from a young person. And by the way, so many people actually commented on it. So these are what the young people are doing. Let us continue agitating for more. Let us continue pushing for more. The struggle must continue unabated. Aluta continua a luta contra ignorancia. Moi, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Comrade Basopo. What a point of departure. Solomonic, you just carried on with the chain, the pattern of submitting Solomonic submissions. Well, without wasting time again, let me give Anotida Chikumbu the same opportunity to give us his closing remarks and possibly recommendations on how to emancipate the people of Zimbabwe.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. David, and thank you very much for chairing this particular panel. This was an interesting discussion. I've learned a lot from the contributions that have been made by the other panelists. So I do believe that for us to be able to assure people a happy, a prosperous and fulfilling life back in Zimbabwe, in our country, in our lovely motherland, we have to configure and we have to establish an environment that will encourage the political will to act amongst our youths. We need to conscientize as many people as possible so that they do understand our grievances, they do understand our plights, and they do understand how and why we need to fight to change this status quo, because it's one area that many people have not comprehensively appreciated that it needs to be done. And most fundamentally, we do also need to be supportive of those that are working to establish platforms and institutions that will enable this change to be achieved, be it in the civil society or even in government or even student movements and so forth. We've got many unsupported movements that are going on in our country. Many unsupported talk shows, many unsupported radio programs, many unsupported articles, many unsupported views that are being aired out there by the majority of our youths and some other older people who belong to, the older generations. We need to be supportive of that. That will help our movement and fight for a better Zimbabwe. But nevertheless, let me extend my revolutionary thanks and revolutionary salutations to you, the chairperson, for organizing this discussion, and to the participants on this discussion and the viewers of this channel. Thank you very much, Mr. David, and thank you very much to all those viewers watching this show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anotida Chikumbu. It was beautiful having you here. Thank you for your submissions. And of course, in the same spirit, I thank everyone that was a part of our panel today. You guys, you really made some wonderful contributions. But of course, last but not least, Jamila, I would like to bring you in now so that you can submit your closing remarks and of course your recommendations on how we can liberate on our country, our teapot shaped and endowed with natural resources, mineral resources, beautiful country of Zimbabwe. Tabiso, over to you.
Thank you so much, David. Well, I think what I would like to close with is to say that we as a people, we as a country, we need to find ourselves at a place where we really look at the challenges that we are facing, and we need to be able to point out our challenges first, and we need to be able to confront those challenges as a united people. Right now, the biggest thing that we need to recognize is that the government of the day is a very paranoid government, and it's a government that has so much fear that we can capitalize on. The government fears us as young people. It fears us because we are young, and that's why they're doing everything that they are doing to repress and silence our voices. And we should not see that from the dark point, but it should be the light, it should be the motivation, it should be the inspiration for us to come together as young people, to collect our efforts and come as a united front and defend the country that we so much love. So I really want to say that we need to recognize our power as people, because at this point I know the government has so much fear, because if it didn't have fear, then there's no use to use to weaponize law, really, to silence the voices, to use the weapons that the colonial regime used, because it feared black people. So we are having the same cycle, and it's also up to us to then see that it's not really too late for us to come together. It's not really too late for us to build trust in each other. It's not really too late for us to come and defend our country. And I know that at some point we are going to do it. Yes.
Thank you so much, Chavi. So I want to especially thank you because I do understand maybe how your day, I think I have an idea of the kind of day you are having, being at work, simultaneously having to participate in this discourse. I do appreciate you. Thank you for coming through. I really do appreciate. Well, to everyone that was on the panel, I want to say a very big thank you. Thank you for making time. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for Solomonic points, sobering points, illuminating points that I think if young people are to view this video, maybe there are some that were viewing this video as it was ongoing, but even those who are going to watch it when we finally maybe send it all around social media platforms, I would like to believe they're going to take a lot of things, that's going to take a lot of lessons. They're going to take a lot of pointers that are going to be crucial and very important in determining and shaping the future of our struggle for a more free Zimbabwe, a more independent Zimbabwe, a more prosperous Zimbabwe, a Zimbabwe where we can all enjoy certain freedoms, political freedoms, economic freedoms, as we should, as was fought for by those who went to war in order to liberate us as a people. Again, our panelists, thank you so much for joining me. Now to our viewers, I want to say a very big thank you for your support. Thank you for your consistent support, your steadfast support for Africa in Perspective. Conversations with Anodev, conversations with David and Kwaza. Like always, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Now, don't forget to encourage people, encourage and ensure that they also like and follow us on all our social media platforms. As well as always make sure that each time we have a session, they are here to learn. Because one of the goals that we have as a platform, it is to generate knowledge, to be a starting point of conversations, critical conversations that are critical in shaping the future of Africa and different African countries. From me, and of course the panelists, it is a very big thank you and goodbye.